I'm a strong advocate of the use of technology in education. I have also extensive experience in working in international markets and doing business development. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. So we're going to present for about 45 minutes. This is an hour-long session. We'll have time at the end for questions. So when we get to the question time, you can either type your question into the Q&A block on your interface, or you can raise your hand and I will call on you. So we're going to be looking today at what the impact of AI is going to have on education and what impact it's going to have on teachers particularly. So if you were to ask, for example, Bill Gates what he would say about what the future is for AI in education, he would point to personalized learning as the key contribution that AI can make. That is, making it possible for learners to be able to learn at their own pace. And I think that that's a key aspect of what AI can contribute, but that is only part of the story. And in particular, it leaves open the question of what the role for teachers is going to be if students are all learning at their own pace. How's that going to work for teachers? And there's some actually these days who are claiming that, well, we don't need teachers anymore. What we can do is provide intelligent machines that can simulate what teachers can do, and then teachers won't be necessary anymore. Personally, I'm skeptical of that view, and the reason is that if you look at the research on learning, it's clear that the most important contribution to learning outcomes is having a good teacher. Good teaching is more important than any other factor in terms of predicting learning outcomes. So it makes us wonder, well, why should we be trying to replace good teachers? Maybe what we should be doing is helping teachers to be able to perform at their best. And the fact is that teachers need a lot of help in the current system. The teaching profession is very time-consuming, and a lot of that time is spent on activities that are not teaching per se. So this makes one wonder, would it be possible to provide teachers with assistance so that they can use their time better and so they can then focus on what they do best in helping learners? So we think that AI can help, and we're going to talk here about how AI can help. But before we do that, we kind of need to talk a little bit about what AI is, what its key capabilities are, and how those capabilities can contribute to learning and to teaching. So overall, AI, artificial intelligence, is a broad term for giving machines the ability to seem like they have human intelligence. And in some applications, you want AIs that could potentially replace people. For example, we see more and more of autonomous driving systems where the vehicle can do the driving in place of a driver. That's not what we foresee for AI in education. We don't see AI as replacing teachers, but we can see AI as a tool that can assist teachers. So you could think of AI as an aide intelligente, a teacher's aide who can help the teacher in carrying out key activities in the learning process. And to see how that might work, let's break AI down one level to look at the common capabilities that AI systems have, and then what those would look like in an educational context. So first of all, AI systems have the ability to understand, to collect data, to analyze it, to interpret it. So this is true for an autonomous vehicle, which needs to be able to observe the road, say recognize when a pedestrian is walking into the roadway. It's also very important in an educational context as students, as learners are interacting with systems, they're generating a lot of data, and so an AI and education system needs to be able to interpret and analyze that data, understand what that means about what the learner knows, where they need to improve, where they need help. Another key capability of AI systems is decision making. The ability for the system to take actions to achieve goals. So in the autonomous driving context, the vehicle needs to be able to take the decision to swerve to avoid the pedestrian. In the case of educational systems, the system needs to decide what kind of feedback to give, what topic to focus on next. And then finally, AI systems generally have the ability to learn and to improve. So where we think AI is going to help is in creating software systems that can work in support of and, in fact, in collaboration with teachers to achieve learning outcomes. So as the AI system is analyzing a learner's work, a learner's responses, developing an understanding of what the student knows, it can then communicate that to the teacher, so the teacher has insight as to what the students are doing. Actually, you can think of it as providing additional eyes for the teacher to be able to monitor individually what every student in the class is doing. And this is, of course, important in class, and it's doubly important, say, for homework. So that right now, when a student is doing work at home, they don't have access to a teacher, very little access to a teacher. We have these aide intelligente systems in place. They can have access to the students and then report back to the teacher the next day how well the students are doing. Decision making is very important because students learn at different rates and have different knowledge, skill sets. It is important for the AI system to be able to decide what would be an appropriate activity for the student, exercise, what's appropriate feedback, but that should be in support of the overall instructional plan that the teacher has developed. So basically what we envision is a situation where the teacher is defining the learning objectives, and then the AI system is helping to implement those learning goals. And then finally, what the system learns about the students can provide then insights to teachers to help teachers in their decision making of how to plan or even how to adapt their instruction based upon how the students are progressing and what their needs are. So a key part of that then is the role of data, analyzing that and utilizing that. And that's, of course, a factor now in education. So Karen, why don't you say a little bit more about this and how AI can contribute to the analysis and use of data?
Sure. Thank you, Louis. So as Louis mentioned, a key element of AI is the ability for the system to collect data. Now think about for a moment in the role of a teacher. They are on a daily basis being inundated with data from all different sources, everything from assessments to data from the classroom to school records to feedback from peers, administration, parents. So as a teacher, just think for a moment the amount of data that's coming into a teacher about a student, and then multiply that by the number of students that a teacher has in the classroom. It becomes a virtually impossible task for the teacher to not just retain that data, but to do anything with that data much less process it in some sort of meaningful way. Next. But what if we could capture and process that data in a meaningful way? So if I'm a teacher and I have all that data in front of me, which we know has some sort of effect on how a teacher teaches and how a student learns, if we could capture that in a meaningful way and do something with it, it would make the overall teaching and learning experience significantly better. And I think you would agree with that. But the good news is, with AI, you can do that. This is not a dream. This is possible. Next. So think about for a moment, if you had all that data as a teacher, what could you do with it? And here are some possible examples. One is, as Lewis is discussing, we can provide personalized feedback. So according to Bill Gates, the future of AI in education is personalized feedback. But not just personalized feedback at a high level, but personalized feedback even at a discrete level on specific areas, not just, oh, very good or not good, but very good in this area, but maybe needs improvement in another area. And following on from that, with an AI system, the system could then suggest activities and exercises to improve on those areas of weakness, and or motivate learners to explore further in areas that they're showing interest in, and monitor progress, provide overall group and class enforcement. So through the monitoring, if a teacher finds that a particular group or the entire class needs further reinforcement in a particular area, through the data, the teacher can see this and decide to provide that reinforcement. Or they might decide that they want to group those students by level and interest. And pulling it up one more level, the data allows teachers and administrators to analyze class, school, district, state data to see where there are areas that might need improvement or areas that are working really well. But at the very end, the goal would be to provide a more effective learning experience for the students and a more effective teaching experience for the teacher. Next. I want to talk a little bit about a concrete example, learning to speak a foreign language. I think most of us have either studied a foreign language in high school or in college or at a language institute, or have been faced with teaching a foreign language to a multitude of students, or even in a personal situation where you're trying to learn a few phrases before you go on a trip. So according to Noonan, a renowned linguist, he says that success is measured in terms of the ability to carry out a conversation in the target language. So most of us, when we learn a foreign language, our goal really is to be able to converse with somebody or to perform a task, not minimizing the importance of reading or listening or writing, but really, and particularly in the global economy we live in now, it's really about oral communication and being able to communicate a thought to someone or to getting something done. Next. And supported by a recent study by the Cambridge University Press with 733 teachers across the globe, they have ranked speaking skills as being much more important than the other skills, 70%, in fact, in order of importance, as opposed to 7% in reading. Next. And as we all know, speaking is fundamental to human communication. We spend about 70 to 80% of our working hours speaking, as opposed to 16% reading. So whether you're speaking in your native language or whether you're trying to speak in a foreign language, you cannot get away from the importance of being proficient in speaking. But on the other hand, most of classroom time is not spent on the teaching of speaking as a skill. And why is that? Next. Well, first of all, let's look at the overall arena around the teaching of speaking. First of all, in the upper left, the most valued activity in the teaching of speaking is around role plays. Why? Because role plays, up until now, in traditional classrooms, are the closest you can get to simulating what one might say in real life. But there are definite restrictions and around using of role plays. Role plays tend to be completely scripted. You can only have 2 or 3 people practicing off in the corner, and it creates a difficult situation. But at the same time, teachers place a lot of importance on providing feedback. So imagine that you and a group are trying to do a role play around a particular topic. Is it feasible for a teacher to go around the classroom and listen to every group and provide discrete feedback? I think not. On the other hand, shyness and embarrassment often hinder speaking practice as well. Students are often shy and embarrassed to speak out. There are students who don't want to say anything until they feel confident in the language, or they just are not comfortable with that kind of activity. Another issue around this teaching of speaking is that teachers often will look for topics that are outside of the core curriculum. And this makes sense because teachers are very aware that the goal of students is to learn to speak and communicate in a variety of situations that are often not completely covered within the class curriculum. Next. So those are factors that influence the teaching of speaking. As I mentioned, students sometimes don't say anything, shy or embarrassed, or it's a cultural issue. Students will revert to native language because the activity is not at their level, or there are various levels of students in the classroom. Some teachers also don't like organizing speaking activities because students are going to make noise. If you have everybody practicing a conversation or a role play, there is going to be noise. It takes a lot of time. And as I said before, it's difficult to provide feedback. So here we have a situation where the teaching and learning of speaking, communication, oral communication, is highly valued, very necessary. There are things that are happening in the classroom. Teachers are doing their best, but there are limitations, and therefore making it very difficult to teach speaking. So what can we do? Next. We can use AI. How does AI change this equation? First of all, AI enables learners to interact with on-screen avatars in authentic communication. Okay, so it accommodates students at multiple levels. It allows the teacher to spend valuable classroom time focusing on instruction rather than trying to set up practice time in class, which, as you saw in the previous slides, doesn't always work very well. And it provides practice for all the students. Instead of a few students practicing with each other and maybe not so successfully, every student now, through practicing with an on-screen avatar, can have a personalized experience. And because these types of avatars can be made available on any device, students can practice anytime, anywhere, and can get the kind of feedback that is personalized to them. But more importantly, it engages students in meaningful communication. It's not scripted. Role plays, because of the nature of how you have to set them up, tend to be scripted. But life is not scripted. When I go out to a restaurant to order something, I may know what I want, but I don't know what the waiter's going to say to me. Or if I am trying to set up a meeting with somebody, I know what time I want the meeting. I may know where I want the meeting to be held, but I don't know what the other person is going to say. So scripts have their place within a traditional classroom, but we know that's not ideal. So how can we expand that? We can expand that by using on-screen avatars. And we're not selecting from multiple choice prompts. No one's telling me what to say. I decide what I want to say. And again, that's real life. Pronunciation practice. Pronunciation is important to oral communication. Don't want to minimize that. But pronunciation is not everything in terms of communication. If you think about a continent like Europe, where you have many, many countries with many people speaking in different accents, as long as those people are able to use language in a communicative way, no one complains about their pronunciation. So it's not about matching your pronunciation to a particular other person's pronunciation, the so-called native speaker. It's about having pronunciation that's intelligible to the other person you're speaking to. And again, I also want to emphasize, AI is not just Alexa. Many people think, oh, I don't like AI, or AI is not good because I have an Alexa or something like that, and it doesn't understand me when I say this, or it only can give me small pieces of information. The interaction that one has with Alexa is very limited. You have something you want to know, and if it happens to be in Alexa's database, they will respond with that particular piece of information. But you're not communicating, you're not having a dialogue. The other way AI can help, as Louis talked about before, is it uses data to continually assess the performance of the learners. And Louis will talk further about this later. But there's lots of ways that we can provide analysis of learner performance using AI. And the other is that it promotes sustained learning. This is not a one-time interaction with an avatar. You can interact with that avatar multiple times in multiple ways. Next. So what can the future look like? And by the way, the future is now. It's not 20 years from now. The future is now, and this can happen now. So think about teachers really just utilizing class time for teaching of new materials. And practice is done by students on their own. And as the students are practicing, they're receiving personalized feedback and personalized activities. And while that's happening, teachers can monitor the progress of students on a dashboard and have identified for them what areas students may be weak in or what areas the class may be weak in. And the teacher can then assign additional support to individual students, or that can be done by the system. And then the teacher can then regroup with the group or the class and go over problem areas. And then ask the students to practice again, and so the cycle continues. So the main point here is that teachers, as Louis pointed out, are an integral part of the overall equation. But the role of teachers can change for the better. It can make the whole teaching and learning experience considerably more effective. Next. Now I want to turn it over to Louis to talk a little bit more about a real-life example of how AI has been turned into a system for learning. Louis?
Thank you. So I think the important takeaway here is that AI can support learning education in a number of different ways. And what we foresee are systems that really provide systemic assistance to learning, to various aspects of the educational process. And we have, I'll show you here an example where we're developing that kind of systemic solution. So what that entails? So that includes immersive practice environments where learners can practice what they're learning in realistic situations along the line of what Karen talked about, that provide formative assessments so that the AI is constantly assessing how well the student is progressing, where they have gaps in their knowledge, that provides feedback on how well the learners are performing, as well as personalized learning in the sense of selecting learning activities that address the particular areas where an individual learner needs help. And then finally, performance analytics, analysis of data that can be provided to learners, to teachers, and to administrators. And ultimately, we see all of these to be valuable. From the teacher's perspective, to get snapshots of how well their class is doing, for learners to provide summaries for them of how well they're progressing and where they need to focus on, and at the institutional level to get an overall view of how well the system is performing and to what extent the learners are meeting the learning outcomes of the program. So we can illustrate these in context of Alelo's N-Skill platform, which is being used currently in a couple of dozen countries around the world. It helps learners to practice and develop their spoken communication skills. The examples I'm going to show you here are for learning English, but the platform is being used for other languages as well. So the idea in using N-Skill is that the learner, they use a microphone, they pull up a web browser, and then up appears a animated avatar that they can have a conversation with. So here, for example, shows a screenshot from such a conversation. So on the top left, you see a transcript of how the conversation has progressed up to this point. And then on the top right are hints of different things that the learner can talk about. So these are hints of topics, but not hints of specific things for the learner to say. So this is a big change from products that are out there now that frequently present responses and the learners have to read them off the screen. We try to avoid that because in real life you don't have things to read off the screen. You have to be able to engage in conversation. But that having been said, we provide enough help, enough scaffolding, if you will, so that learners who are still learning the language competencies can still get through the immersive simulation, get feedback of where they need to improve, and also get a sense, an understanding of what it is that they're learning and the context of that learning, so that as they learn it, they can associate that with a specific conversational context. So learner goes through such a conversation, and at the end, they get feedback on where they did well and where they need to improve. So, for example, from the last screenshot, here the student is supposed to be interviewing other students about what they like to do in their free time. And the feedback here is that the student needed to do more about asking questions about when, where, and how often they take part in leisure activities. And then N-Skill selects exercises that focus in on those specific skills, provides a personalized learning plan. So here, for example, student has been prompted to listen to a prompt and then respond about how often they play sports. And so the system responds back, says, okay, I heard you say I play sports often. Good, you are able to talk about sports. Key about these exercises is that they are not looking for specific phrases for the learner to say, but is using AI to interpret what the learner said and to analyze what the learner said and to make sure that it is appropriate for the exercise. This also takes into account common N-Skills knowledge base of common mistakes that learners make that is developed from the data that we're collecting from learners around the world. So there's an ongoing learning process going on of N-Skill. As it interacts with learners around the world, it is better able to recognize and provide feedback to common mistakes that learners make. So learner goes through these exercises, and when they're ready, they can try a simulation again. And at this point, hopefully, they can go through it smoothly without any assistance. But if they need further help, they can get it. And again, they're going to get an assessment of how well they perform. And so then the cycle continues. They can then focus on the particular areas that they need to work on next. And this approach, by the way, can be used for initial learning. It can also is very helpful for refreshing and retaining communication skills. So, and I think this is a key advantage that AI has, is that it can provide an ongoing learning resource after the class is done. A lot of the learners we support, they study a language in class, and then it may be 6 months before they actually are in a situation in a foreign country where they need to use the language that they've learned. So this type of approach can be very helpful for helping people quickly rebuild their spoken proficiency. So what this then accomplishes overall is learning with the end goal in mind. We design these learning activities to be aimed at particular learning objectives that come out of the proficiency standards for a spoken proficiency. And so once the system knows what the objective is, what the competency is that a learner is going to focus on, then it can personalize the learning experience to help learners progress rapidly. And this can be used for self-study, but importantly, it can be used with direction from a teacher who can decide what are the particular proficiency objectives that the students need to work on. Now, in what I showed you, the practice and the feedback are separate. Looking ahead, we see opportunities to combine these. And just as if you're learning a language and you're speaking with a native speaker, the native speaker may give you feedback without you even realizing that they're giving it to you, but when they're not acting as a teacher per se, that is to say, is not turning the conversation into in a grammar exercise. So here in this example is illustration of how we can do that. It's illustration of what is called in language learning recasting, where the other speaker kind of repeats back or elaborates on what the learner said as a way of providing feedback on what the learner said. So let's say, for example, here the student is reporting on a soccer match. So the avatar says, "What's happening on the field?" And the student says, "Number 8 is kicking the ball." So the learner has mispronounced the L in ball, and so it sounds like ball instead of ball. So then the avatar comes back and says, "Which player is running with the ball?" And so this can alert the student, "Oh, I made a mistake there. I'll have to make a note of that." And then the conversation continues, and the student says, "Now he passes to number 9. And then the avatar says, "Oh, so he's passing to number 9, the captain. What is the number 9 doing?" So what we have learned in working with second language teaching experts is that it's important to keep learners practicing, getting them comfortable with conversation, but there are opportunities to provide feedback in the context of the conversation, and AI is capable of doing that. The technology that we're using to analyze student inputs can be used to provide immediate feedback in context. As far as providing analytics, here's where I see a lot of interesting potential. So right now, internally at Alelo, we collect analytics of how students are performing on all the different modules that we've created. And so this we use internally to assess how well the software is doing, but this is also could be very helpful to go into a dashboard to provide insight to teachers as to how well the students are doing. So instead of simply getting credit of whether they completed the exercise or not, they can get metrics of how well the student performed it. And that can have to do with taking into account accuracy of the learner responses, as well as the speed, the fluency of the learner responses. So as we're collecting data from learners interacting with N-Skill, we can measure their average time for conversational turn and look how that decreases over time. And as it decreases, that provides indication that they're not just getting the answers right, but they are progressing toward fluency. And fluency, of course, is one of the key goals of achieving proficiency. This enables the AI software to go much farther in promoting language proficiency than compared to tools that are simply focusing on memorizing vocabulary and the like. Now, we've applied N-Skill, as I said, to spoken language learning, but actually there are a wide range of important skills that fall under the umbrella of soft skills that are of interest to employers. In fact, where some of the biggest skill gaps are today. So there's a study that LinkedIn did that showed that the biggest skill gap in the U.S. workforce is in communication skills. So we see potential for providing AI-based, simulation-based practice activities to develop those communication skills in particular industries, particular subject matter areas. So, for example, helping healthcare professionals to be more empathetic with their patients and promote treatment compliance. Helping sales professionals to be able to develop rapport with customers, to help them solve their problems more effectively. Communication skills for the workplace, so that as people are promoted to managerial positions, they can role play various situations where they might have to work with people who report with them. Sexual harassment prevention. A lot of the e-learning software that's available for sexual harassment prevention is really just focusing on making sure people understand the law related to sexual harassment. We can create simulations where you can actually be put in a situation where you have to decide on the spot, what are you going to say, are you going to do if, for example, you observe an interaction of coworkers that you think might lead to sexual harassment. So there's lots of interesting potential there. And then getting back to teaching, we see this technology as offering value in teacher training itself. So, for example, we can create simulations in which a student teacher is standing in front of a class of student avatars and can practice communicating with the class, practice classroom management. What you see here is a screenshot from a prototype that was developed at the University of Central Florida. For this, there has to be somebody in the background who's controlling all of these avatars, and that kind of limits its use. I think in the future, we will see these types of immersive teacher training environments where the avatars are artificially intelligent, and so the learner, the student teacher, is getting practice and feedback on how well they're doing. Very similar to what we saw before in the speaking applications. So this is the conclusion of our presentation. Here is our contact information, and I do encourage you to reach out to us if you have further questions, further insights about this very important topic. And as a reminder, we are scheduling additional webinars throughout the year, so I encourage you to come back and attend more of these. So we'll now switch to question and answer. So you can either type your question into the Q&A box or just raise your hand and we'll call on you. And while people are thinking of their questions, Karen, is there anything else you would like to add or emphasize on what we just covered?
Not at this point. Let's see what questions there might be. Thank you.
Good. Hand is raised from Chakri. Go ahead, Chakri. We can't hear you. I'm not sure. Let me make sure everybody is unmuted.
The conference has been unmuted.
Let's see. We'll come back to you in a moment, Chakra. Richard, can you have your hand raised? Can we? Do you have a question?
Yeah. How does an educational institution or corporate training or training developer get into the little solution, a little platform, what a short version of what needs to happen to have a course like this, either standalone or in blended instruction?
Yeah. So what we typically do is we set up an agreement with an institution that provides the students in that institution unlimited access. So basically, it's a subscription that is based on the number of registered users. And any institution or any organization can do that. And then you have a couple of options. One is to subscribe to content that we already have developed. The other is we can work with you to create content specifically for your needs. And our plans going forward actually is to provide tools to organizations so that they can create their own content running on this platform. Chakra, you want to try again? Oh, I see your question. All right, so question, how long has N-Skill been in place, and how is the general feedback from students? And what is the main age demographic for N-Skill? So, the technology underlying N-Skill has been developed over the course of about 10 years and has been used broadly in the U.S. military for foreign language training, not just U.S. military, but in other countries, Australia, England, Germany, to learn foreign language and cultural skills. N-Skill is our first cloud-based product, and we launched that about a year ago. And being cloud-based, it can run in multiple servers, and we have servers on multiple continents at this point. What's the general feedback from the students? Very positive. They see this as a good way of practicing their communication skills. In fact, we just recently completed a trial in Serbia, and if you're interested, I can forward you the results. We took some basic level simulations and gave them to advanced students in a special purpose program for information technology, and the students saw that even though they were relatively advanced, they still found it helpful to use N-Skill to practice the conversation. And this also consistent with what we heard from the teachers, which is that these students are in large classes, like up to 80 students. They didn't have much opportunity to practice in class, so this gave them an opportunity that otherwise was lacking for them. Richard, do you have another question?
No, I just didn't unlower my hand. Sorry.
Okay. I just checking to be sure. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, actually, I do.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I do. Drilling deeper into the relationship. Hey, can you give a 10,000-foot view of what costs we're looking at? I ask because some of these AI solutions are just obscenely overpriced. So I want to see whether Lilo is obscenely priced or reasonably priced. What are your thoughts?
Well, it really boils down to just a few dollars per student per month. It is quite inexpensive, and then think of what that provides you. In fact, what some institutions we're working with are now recognizing is because they've got this system which is providing support for teachers, that it's now possible for for programs to affordably expand their programs, particularly their online learning programs. And I want to emphasize this, that one place where we're getting a lot of interest is from online schools, where students often feel isolated and often don't have much opportunity to practice. And so they see this as an important value added. And also the online schools many of them are interested in scaling up the number of students they can offer. And so this is part of that solution to be able to reach out to larger numbers of students. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. We are recording this session. We'll post the recording tomorrow. And Chakrit has another question. Yes, Chakrit, go ahead. Is the service more common with online schools or physical location-based schools? It's being used by both. I would say right now it's being used more in physical location-based schools, just in terms of the number of schools. But the online schools, although fewer in number, have larger student populations. So, and I think the reason why it works well in both contexts is that for the reasons that we've cited, we've designed it so that it supports teachers, that it supports blended learning solutions. But those blended learning solutions don't have to be either limited to online learning or to learning in a classroom. Very good. Okay. So we're near the top of the hour. So I would like to thank everyone for participating, and do let your friends know that these webinars will be continuing. We're going to be delving into further topics on this important area of how AI can improve education and training and really have a big impact. So thanks, and talk to you next time.
Thank you.